Welcome to Chad Hates Carbs. Today we're going to be taking a look at a really exciting bread recipe. I really hope that it turns out as good as what it looks like, because there's like very few ingredients, as you can see. We've got salt, baking powder, cream of tartar, butter, eggs, and the ever-present almond flour. So we're going to go ahead and get started by preheating the oven to 375. And then we got to do the fun bit of separating egg whites. And separating egg whites is always one of those things that kind of freaks people out a little bit, but it's really not that bad. What we'll do is we're going to, we actually, in this recipe, we actually use both halves of the egg, so you don't end up with the extra yolks that you need to turn into custard or whatever, which is kind of nice. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the whites, the egg whites in the KitchenAid, because we need to then turn around and beat them until we've got nice soft peaks. So to separate an egg, I've gone over this before in some other recipes, but basically you want to crack the egg in half, and then you want to kind of dump the yolk into the other half of the eggshell, and let the eggshell itself kind of cut the yolk out. If you get a little bit of extra whites in the yolks, it's fine. This means it's a little bit less efficient. You won't get quite as many whites, but that's generally okay. So you want to separate it, get it to split, and then you want to dump it. And you really don't want to get any yolks in the egg white bit, because if you do, you're kind of hosed, because it messes up. And my wife's the food scientist, not me. It messes up something in the way that the egg white's set up, so the yolks actually will damage that, so they won't beat correctly, which is obviously a problem. So you definitely want to make sure that you do not get any yolks in with your egg whites. That was an unfortunate cracking of the egg there. So what I'm going to do in this case, because it didn't break cleanly, I'm going to keep keep the shell here. I'm going to let the whites go through my fingers, because I'm afraid that it's going to break if I put them in contact with each other. That's another thing you can do, way that you can do it when you have an error like that. So again, the kick with a lot of the separation of eggs, you do have to be careful. Like in that case, there was a little bit of a shell that kind of was poking at the yolk. You can't let that puncture the yolk, or you're going to have a problem. Come on now. Pour it in there. Let that eggshell cut that off. There we go. We'll go ahead. Can we get a little bit more? There we go. There we go. So that's a little bit of extra white in the yolk, but again, it doesn't really matter. The issue that you're looking for is you just have to keep the yolk out of the white, not the other way around. Okay. So we're going to dump that. And there's people that are really, really fast at this, obviously. Those people do this a lot more than I do. So I do cook a lot of eggs, but I don't separate them unless I'm doing a special recipe. So let's see here. There we go. It's also kind of hard to talk and do this at the same time, because you do have to be careful. Okay, so with that, we've got our 6 egg whites in the KitchenAid. So we're going to take the KitchenAid and we're just going to beat it until we get stiff peaks. That's kind of the standard method that you use, is to go to stiff peaks. But to do that, we're going to give it a little bit of help by adding a little bit of cream of tartar. You don't have to have the cream of tartar in there, but it does make it work a little bit better. So if you go 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, it's not a lot, but just that little extra bit will help the egg whites firm up good. So we're going to go ahead and slap in 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Get that out of the way, get this started, and then while this is going, go for a while. And then we want to combine the egg yolks, these egg yolks here, the butter, the almond flour, etc. We do need to melt this butter though, so we're going to grab another bowl. And we only need 4 tablespoons of butter. So you only need half a stick. We'll get our half a stick of butter. And get this melting. I'm going to check on this real quick. Stiff peaks are the idea of a stiff peak. When you're pulling it out, you want it to like actually stand up when you do that. And this is obviously not that. It's still pretty runny. So this is not done yet. Let's get that guy back on there. Going. Now, this is the part that I'm not sure about. We've got our melted butter. I love it when people put things away and don't put them where I expect them. Okay, so our stiff peaks are done, and this is more what a stiff peak looks like. When it comes out and you can have it stand up on its own when it comes out, that is a stiff peak. So we're done with the egg whites. They are happy. Okay, so that's the stiff peaks bit, so we're good there. So now this next part talks about using a food processor, and this is the part of this recipe that's really interesting to me because I have never seen this before. The idea that you're going to, in a food processor, do the rest of this work is kind of crazy to me. So what we're going to do, we're going to try it. We're going to see if this works. And I think it's crazy because every time I used to make waffles with folding in egg whites and all that kind of stuff, there was always this thing where it's like you need to be very careful when you're folding them in. And this is telling me to do it in a food processor, which seems to be the antithesis of all of that. So we'll see. At any rate, we want to combine the egg yolks. Let me get out my spatula here. Scrape out my egg yolks because we need all that protein in there. Yay, protein. Okay, egg yolks. We're going to do our melted butter. Again, this is just half a stick melted in the microwave. There we go. And then we want to put in the almond flour. So we need 1.5 cups of almond flour. Because I don't like getting everything dirty, I'm going to get the 3 half cups. There we go. There's 1. Dump it on myself. There's 2. There's 3. Fractions are fun, kids. Okay. So there's our 3 half cups of almond flour. And then we need baking powder and salt. And it's asking for just a pinch of salt. So a pinch to me is like about that much. And then we need 3 teaspoons of baking powder. So we're going to get our teaspoon. 3 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2, 3. And I think this right here, this combined with the cream of tartar and the whipped egg whites, I think that's going to be the secret to why this bread works. But we will see. We will see whether or not the bread works. And that's the fun part, is trying to figure out all the crazy. All right. So at this point, they're telling me that I need to just mix all this stuff until combined, and it's going to be thick and lumpy, which I would expect from something that has like literally no liquid in it at all, other than the egg white, or sorry, the egg yolks. So again, this seems insane to me, but we will see. So let's get this thing going. Okay. Okay, that's pretty thick. Wow, yes, that's very thick and lumpy. Okay, add the beaten egg whites to the mixture and further process. Be careful not to overmix. Again, I'm a little confused as to how this is going to actually play out, but that's what they say to do. So I'm going to put these in here, and it seems to me like you're not really going to be able to get a whole lot of anything going here. Because these egg whites literally are like the opposite consistency as this other stuff. And there's so many egg whites and so little room in here, I'm a little confused. So I'm going to just put this on and we will see if I can get it to kind of mix down in, and then I can add the rest of them. Oop, I missed some. There you go, you can go back in there. I almost licked my fingers, that would probably not taste good. 1 and 2, salmonella, okay. Where are you at? There we go. Okay, that is not seeming like it's mixing very much at all. It's not mixing. This is what I was afraid of. See? It's kind of all in one big cluster or whatever. Not super awesome. Right now I'm just literally cutting into the dough here, just trying to kind of get it somewhat mashed in with the whites, and it's starting to get runny, which is like, again, not what I would normally consider to be successful for some kind of a recipe that is expecting the whites to be add a bunch of fluffiness. So but obviously, what would the what would the food processor be doing other than doing exactly that, just really, really fast and with a very sharp blade? So we're going to see if, now that I've done that at least a little bit, kind of getting it some mixed in a little bit, if that's going to be enough to make it so that it'll catch enough to finish integrating the egg whites. So we'll see. See what we get out of this. Okay, let's push this down around the outside a little bit. Okay, there we go. Well, it's actually mixing now, at least. Okay, now it says once the whites are incorporated, stop mixing, so I'm going to assume that that's pretty much incorporated, short the stuff that kind of got shoved up to the top here. So let's go ahead and kind of cut that stuff in a little bit, and then maybe do a couple more pulses real quick, and then call that good. Okay. Okay, and that will do it. Okay, so now what we need to do is wash my hands. Still a bit freaked out by salmonella because my pastor just got over a really bad sickness brought on by salmonella. All kinds of horrible, horrible things. So don't eat a lot of raw dough anymore. So anyway, so we need to do a loaf pan, and I'm kind of like wondering exactly, like, because I've got some of these silicone ones, but I think for this one I'm just going to go ahead and use this standard, just a standard old loaf pan. just because this will be a nice test of whether or not it rises well. Those smaller loaf pans, I've got some that make hamburger buns and stuff. If this works well, I might try to see if I can put them in my hamburger bun stuff, but in the hamburger bun pans. But for now, we're just gonna go ahead and lube this up. The general idea, obviously, even though it's non-stick, to make sure it's non-stick. Not that I'm paranoid or anything. Let's see what we can get off of here. And it's okay if this is like when I make waffles or whatever. A lot of times you'll still see a little bit of white in there. It's not, the dough is not all one color, but generally speaking, that's all right. Doesn't really negatively impact it. It cooks through just fine and will be more homogeneous when it's completed. So let's go ahead and dump this stuff out in here and get this going. Not too bad. I am a little disappointed in the way that I had to pull out the mixture, but you know, it is what it is. Maybe next time I might actually mix it a little bit less before I start integrating the egg whites so that it's less mixed, because I think that might actually help it a little bit. But I mean, I was able to dump it right into the other container, so it's not like it hurt anything. So this also seems like not a whole lot of batter. So, or what do you call it? Dough? Anyway, it feels like batter. I mean, in terms of the way that it is acting, it's much more of like a waffle batter or a pancake batter, less than a dough. I guess that's kind of the nature of a lot of your low carb stuff, though, too. Is it tends to be a little bit less like regular stuff. But hey, those of us that are doing low carb, we're not regular, are we? Okay. So there we have it. Got our stuff in here. Kind of spread that around a little bit. All right. So we're going to slap this in here for 30 minutes, and we'll come back and check on it then. Timer 1, 30 minutes. Well, it sure smells like bread in here, and our timer just dinged, so we're going to check it out with our toothpick. Guess what? The oven's hot. Came out clean, so we're going to go ahead and pull this guy out of here. And it has risen, well, I'm quite surprised. So it's definitely not exactly the same. Obviously, it's a little bit lighter than you might expect. But that looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to let it sit there for just a second, and we'll come back and try it in a few minutes when it's had a chance to cool down a bit. So I'm super anxious about this, and I have my couple of tests. Formed up really nice, taking it out. It is a little bit springy, so it's, you know, there's definitely a lot of air in there. But the couple of tests I'm going to do, we're going to do the standard, let's put some butter on it, and then, hey, let's make a peanut butter sandwich. So, cuts pretty nice. Definitely is not as dense as I would have expected from the almond flour. You can kind of see, obviously these are not large pieces of bread. It's obviously not going to be something that you're, you know, going to make a big old sandwich with. But if you can see, you've got a lot of very small holes in it. So I'm kind of wondering if, again, if it wouldn't have been better if I would have not let the thick part, when it's really dense, let that, I think I might have used the food processor too much, I guess is what I'm saying. So maybe if I would have switched that up, that might have been better. But we're going to try this just with some butter. Still warm, so that's good. And we're going to see what it tastes like. It's good. It doesn't taste eggy, which is normally, which is normally the concern. The texture's pretty good. It's not very strong. It definitely doesn't taste yeasty at all. So, if you're, excuse me, if you were wanting to get that kind of an effect, kind of that yeasty flavor, yeasty smell, this is not it. This is not the thing for that. So let's do a little bit of the peanut butter and jelly as I try not to die. I swallowed that wrong. Let's see here. Of course, this is sugar-free jelly. They actually have some pretty good flavors at Walmart. This is a blackberry, but I really like it. Don't eat it very often because it still has more carbs than you want to eat on a regular basis. But tastes delicious. So there we go. And we're going to try our micro PB&J. That's a good time. So yeah, I definitely have to say, if you are jonesing for some bread, this is a pretty good recipe. Like I said before, I think there's some concerns that I would have about the mixing. I think that I probably would like it, obviously, to be a little bit bigger, fluffier. Next time, I think if I added a little bit of yeast, I think that would help a little bit for that yeasty kind of a flavor. But that's pretty good. I'll definitely be using this recipe again. Obviously tweaking it a little bit like I always do. But until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.